The morning sky over New York looked different that day. 3 massive ships hung in the air above the United Nations building like dark clouds that would never rain. People stopped on the streets to stare up at them. Some took pictures. Others ran away. Kang Dae-ho adjusted his tie as he walked into the UN building. As the lead diplomat for South Korea, he had been chosen to represent all of humanity in this first meeting with aliens. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating fast. Everything humans had ever wondered about life beyond Earth was about to be answered. Dr. Park So-min carried her research files close to her chest. She had studied biology her whole life, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Real aliens were waiting in the main assembly hall. She had dreamed of this day since she was a child, but now that it was here, she felt small and nervous. The aliens had arrived 3 days ago. They had sent a simple message to every government on Earth at the same time. We come in peace. We wish to meet with your leaders. We have much to discuss. Then they had waited. No threats. No demands. Just patient waiting. Lee Jun-woo pushed his cleaning cart down the hall toward the assembly room. He had worked maintenance at the UN building for 5 years. Most people never noticed him. He liked it that way. It meant he could see and hear things that others missed. Today he was more curious than usual. The doors to the assembly hall opened and the aliens walked in. They looked almost human, but taller and thinner. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were larger than human eyes. They wore simple white robes that seemed to glow with their own light. The alien leader stepped forward. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though its mouth barely moved. I am High Commander Velthara of the Arcturus Coalition. We represent the Galactic Confederation, a union of 437 worlds. Kang Dae-ho stood up from his seat. Welcome to Earth. I am Ambassador Kang Dae-ho. We are honored by your visit. Velthara's large eyes looked around the room, studying each human face. We have been watching your species for many years. You have shown remarkable progress. Your technology, your art, your capacity for growth, it is impressive. Dr. Park So-min felt a small thrill of pride. Humanity had impressed an advanced alien civilization. But something in the alien's voice made her uneasy. There was a coldness there that she could not quite understand. However, Velthara continued, joining the Galactic Confederation is not a simple matter. Every species must prove they are compatible with our values and methods. There are tests that must be completed. What kind of tests? Kang Dae-ho asked. Tests of intelligence? Tests of endurance? Tests of character? The alien's voice never changed tone. It was like listening to a machine speak. These tests have been used for thousands of years. Every member species has completed them successfully. Another alien stepped forward. This one was shorter and wore a different colored robe. I am Commander Zorak. I will oversee the testing process. The tests are designed to bring out the best in your species. They will challenge you, but they are fair. Jin-woo, standing quietly by the wall with his cleaning supplies, watched the aliens carefully. He had learned to read people by watching their body language. These aliens stood too straight. They never looked directly at humans when they spoke. Their hands stayed perfectly still. In Jin-woo's experience, people who never moved their hands were usually hiding something. Dr. Park So-min raised her hand. Can you tell us more about what these tests involve? The tests are different for each species, Velthara replied. They are designed based on your particular strengths and weaknesses. For humans, we have prepared challenges that will test your mental resilience, your physical capabilities, and your social cooperation. How long will these tests take? Asked Kang Dae-ho. That depends entirely on your species, said Zorak. Some complete the tests quickly, others take longer. A few have taken much longer than expected. Jun-woo noticed something odd. When Zorak said, much longer than expected, the alien's eyes had flickered toward Velthara for just a moment. It was barely noticeable, but Jun-woo caught it. In his experience, people only looked at their superiors like that when they were worried about saying too much. The meeting continued for 2 hours. The aliens explained that testing would begin in 1 week. They would select volunteers from all over Earth. The tests would take place in special facilities that the aliens would construct. Everything would be monitored and recorded. We want you to understand, Lothara said near the end of the meeting, that these tests are for your own benefit. The galaxy can be a dangerous place. Only species that prove their strength and wisdom can survive among the stars. After the aliens left, the human leaders sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Kangdeho spoke. Well, this is what we've always dreamed of, contact with an advanced civilization. A chance to join a galactic community. Dr. Park So-min nodded, but she still felt uneasy. Did you notice how they talked about the tests? They kept saying that every species has completed them successfully. But what happened to the species that didn't complete them successfully? Maybe no species has ever failed, suggested one of the other diplomats. Jin-Wu, who was slowly cleaning the area near where they sat, thought about what he had observed. The aliens had been very careful with their words. They had answered every question, but somehow he felt like they had not really told the humans anything important. That evening, Junwoo went home to his small apartment and wrote in his notebook. He had kept a journal for years, writing down things he noticed at work. Tonight, he wrote about the aliens' body language, their choice of words, and the way they had looked at each other. Meanwhile, across the city, Dr. Park So-min sat in her laboratory, staring at the biological scans she had taken of the aliens. The scans showed that the aliens were indeed very different from humans. But there was something else in the data that bothered her. The aliens' brain activity was strange. It was too controlled, too regular, like they were holding back their real thoughts. Kang Dae-ho spent the evening on phone calls with world leaders. Everyone was excited about the opportunity to join a galactic civilization. Plans were already being made to select the best and brightest humans for the tests. Scientists, athletes, military leaders, philosophers, artists. Humanity would send its finest representatives, but in his quiet apartment, Junwoo wrote one final note in his journal: something is not right about these tests. The aliens know more than they are telling us. I think these tests are not what they seem to be. Above the city, the 3 alien ships continued to hang in the sky. Inside them, Velthara and Zorak were meeting with their commanders. The humans seem eager to begin, reported Zorak. Good, replied Velthara. They always are at first. Their enthusiasm will make the braking process more satisfying. How long do you estimate it will take? Based on our psychological profiles, no more than 6 months. Humans show strong individual willpower, but they have never faced tests like ours. Once they understand the hopelessness of their situation, they will submit like all the others. Neither alien noticed that their conversation was being recorded by the ship's maintenance systems. And they certainly did not think about the fact that one very observant human janitor had already begun to suspect that these tests were not what they appeared to be. Dr. Choi Hai-jin sat in the white chair and tried to stay calm. The room around her was completely empty except for the chair and a strange silver device hanging from the ceiling. She had volunteered for the test because she wanted to help humanity, join the galactic community. Now she was starting to wonder if that had been a mistake. The mental evaluation will begin now, said the alien voice from speakers in the walls. Please remain seated and try to relax. The silver device lowered from the ceiling and stopped just above her head. Suddenly, the empty white room disappeared. Hai-jin found herself standing in her childhood home, but everything was wrong. The walls were covered with her failed experiments. Her parents stood in front of her, shaking their heads in disappointment. You were never good enough, her father said. All those years of study, and what do you have to show for it? Nothing. Hai-jin knew this was not real. Her parents had always been proud of her work as a scientist. But the vision felt completely real. She could smell her mother's cooking. She could feel the cold disappointment in her father's voice. The alien technology was making her brain believe something that was not true. In another testing facility. Across the city, Colonel Kim Tae-sung was experiencing his own nightmare. He stood on a battlefield where all his soldiers had died because of his mistakes. The enemy was advancing, and he had no way to stop them. Every tactical decision he had ever made was wrong. Every life lost was his fault. Kim knew about psychological warfare. He understood that this was an attack on his mind. But understanding something and fighting it were two different things. The alien technology was incredibly advanced. It made the hallucinations feel more real than reality. Park Min-ho, the Olympic athlete, found himself running on an endless track. No matter how fast he ran, he never moved forward. His legs grew tired, then weak, then painful. But he could not stop running. Every time he tried to slow down, he could hear the disappointed voices of everyone who had ever believed in him. The aliens had built 12 testing facilities around Earth. In each one, hundreds of human volunteers were experiencing their worst fears and deepest failures. The aliens called it mental conditioning. They said it would help humans understand their limitations and prepare them for the challenges of galactic life, but Junwoo had managed to get a job as a janitor at the main testing facility in Geneva. While the aliens focused on their important experiments, he quietly cleaned the floors and emptied the trash. More importantly, he watched and listened. What he saw worried him. The human volunteers went into the testing chambers looking confident and hopeful. When they came out, they looked broken and defeated. Some of them could barely speak. Others just stared at nothing with empty eyes. Junwoo had found a way to access the maintenance tunnels that ran under the facility. From there, he could reach the observation rooms where the aliens watched the tests. The aliens never noticed him because they thought all humans were either test subjects or unimportant workers. He discovered that the aliens were not just testing humans. They were trying to break their spirits. The psychological attacks were designed to make humans give up hope and accept defeat. Junwoo had seen enough bullies in his life to recognize the pattern. Dr. Choi Hae-jin had been in the testing chamber for 6 hours. The aliens kept showing her different versions of failure and disappointment. They showed her a future where humanity was destroyed because she was not smart enough to save them. They showed her a past where every scientific discovery she had made was actually wrong, but something unexpected began to happen. Instead of breaking down, Hae-jin started to get angry. She realized that the aliens were trying to make her hate herself. That made her want to fight back even more. "This is not real," she said out loud in the hallucination. "My parents loved me. My work is good work, and you cannot make me believe otherwise." The aliens in the observation room were surprised. Most species started to break down after 4 hours of mental conditioning. Humans were lasting much longer than expected. In another chamber, Colonel Kim had figured out that the battlefield was not real. Instead of trying to save his imaginary dead soldiers, he started studying the hallucination itself. How did the alien technology work? What were its weaknesses? "Fascinating," he said to himself. "You can control what I see, but you cannot control how I think about what I see." Park Min-ho had discovered something even more interesting. He found that he could change the endless track by changing his expectations. When he imagined the track having an end, suddenly there was a finish line in the distance. The alien technology was reading his mind, but that meant his mind could influence it too. Meanwhile, Junwoo was in the maintenance tunnels, taking notes in his small notebook. He had figured out how to tap into the alien communication systems. Their language was complex, but their computers used simple mathematical concepts that Junwoo could understand. What he learned made him very worried. The aliens were not trying to prepare humans for galactic life. They were trying to turn humans into slaves. The mental conditioning was designed to destroy human willpower and independence. He also learned something else. This was not the first time the aliens had done this. They had tested hundreds of other species over thousands of years. Species that passed the test became servants of the Galactic Confederation. Species that failed the tests simply disappeared, but there was something in the alien records that gave Junwoo hope. No species had ever resisted the mental conditioning as long as humans were resisting it. The aliens were starting to worry that their standard methods might not work on humans. Dr. Choi Hyjin had been in the chamber for 12 hours. The aliens had tried every psychological attack they could think of. But instead of breaking her down, each attack had made her more determined to resist. She had also discovered something important. When she refused to believe the hallucinations, they became weaker. When she actively fought against them, they sometimes disappeared completely. "No, you can hear me," she said to the empty white room. "Whatever you are trying to do to me, it is not working. Humans do not give up as easily as you think." In the observation room, Commander Zorak was reviewing the test results with growing concern. The humans are not responding as expected. Their resistance to mental conditioning is unprecedented. "Increase the intensity," ordered Valthara. "Every species breaks eventually. Humans cannot be different." But the humans were different. In testing facilities all around Earth, human volunteers were not just surviving the psychological attacks. They were learning to fight back. Some, like Dr. Choi Hyjin, had figured out how to resist the hallucinations. Others, like Colonel Kim, had started analyzing the alien technology itself. Most surprisingly, the humans had begun to help each other. Even though they were in separate chambers, they found ways to communicate and share what they had learned. Park Min-ho discovered that he could send encouraging thoughts to other test subjects. Dr. Choi Hyjin learned to project messages of hope and resistance. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Every other species had become isolated and hopeless under mental conditioning. But humans were becoming more united and more determined. Jun-Woo, still working quietly in the maintenance tunnels, had gathered enough information to understand the full scope of the alien plan. The mental conditioning was just the first phase. If it succeeded, humans would be ready for physical testing that was designed to be impossible to survive. If they somehow survived, that there would be even worse tests waiting, but he had also discovered something that the aliens did not know. Their testing equipment had been designed for species that broke under psychological pressure. It was not built to handle subjects who fought back. The more humans resisted, the more unstable the alien systems became. Jun-Woo began to plan. He could not help the test subjects directly without revealing himself. But he could start making small changes to the alien systems. Changes that would help humans resist and might eventually give them a chance to escape. As the second day of testing began, something unprecedented happened. Dr. Choi Hyjin, Colonel Kim, Park Min-ho, and dozens of other test subjects began to coordinate their resistance. They had turned the alien mind-reading technology into a communication network. "We are stronger together," Hyjin projected to the others. "They want us to feel alone and hopeless, but we are not alone. We have each other." For the first time in their long history of testing alien species, the Galactic Confederation was facing subjects who were becoming more powerful instead of more broken. And deep in the maintenance tunnels, one quiet human janitor was preparing to make their situation much worse. Dr. Yunesi Ora had never seen water so dark and cold. She floated in her diving suit at the entrance to an underwater cave system that seemed to go down forever. The alien facility was built on the ocean floor, 3 miles below the surface. The pressure here would crush a normal human in seconds. "The physical trials will test your species' ability to adapt to extreme conditions," the alien voice spoke through her helmet radio. "You will navigate this underwater maze and reach the exit point. The water temperature is 4 degrees below freezing. The pressure is 40 times Earth normal. You have 6 hours of air." Esiora was a marine biologist. She had spent her whole career studying life in extreme ocean conditions. But this was beyond anything she had ever experienced. The alien technology in her suit was the only thing keeping her alive. Behind her, 5 other human volunteers prepared for the same test. They were all experts in underwater survival, but none of them had ever faced anything like this. The cave system ahead of them was designed to be impossible for humans to navigate. On the other side of Earth, Mountaineer Lim Jae-hyun stood at the base of an artificial mountain that the aliens had built in less than a day. The mountain was 2 miles high, covered in ice, and the gravity around it was 3 times stronger than Earth normal. The air was so thin that even breathing was difficult. "You will climb to the summit and retrieve the marker beacon," announced the alien supervisor. "The gravity field will increase as you climb higher. The temperature will drop to minus 50 degrees. The oxygen content will decrease to 5% of normal." Jae-hyun had climbed every major mountain on Earth. He had survived storms, avalanches, and equipment failures. But this alien mountain was designed to kill him. The aliens were not testing human ability. They were testing how long humans could survive before giving up. In 12 different locations around Earth, similar physical trials were taking place. Humans were being pushed beyond every known limit of endurance, strength, and survival ability. The aliens had studied human physiology for years and designed tests that should have been impossible to complete, but they had made one mistake. They had assumed that humans would face these challenges alone. Dr. Yoon Seo-ra entered the underwater cave system and immediately understood that the maze was designed to confuse and disorient her. The passages twisted in impossible directions. Some led to dead ends. Others led to areas where the pressure was even higher, but Seo-ra had brought something the aliens did not expect. She had spent years working with dolphins, learning how they used echolocation to navigate in dark water. She began to make clicking sounds with her tongue and listened to how the sounds bounced back from the cave walls. Within an hour, she had mapped the entire cave system using sound. What the aliens had designed as an impossible maze became a simple navigation problem. She found the fastest route to the exit and began swimming toward it. Meanwhile, Lin Jae-hyun was climbing the artificial mountain using techniques that the aliens had never seen before. Instead of fighting against the increased gravity, he used it to help him. He turned the climb into a series of controlled falls, using the extra weight to drive his climbing tools deeper into the ice when the oxygen became too thin to breathe. Normally, he switched to a meditation technique that slowed his heart rate and reduced his oxygen needs. When the temperature dropped below what his equipment could handle, he began moving in a pattern that used his own body heat more efficiently. The aliens watching these tests were confused. Their computer models said that humans should have failed within the first hour. Instead, the test subjects were adapting and finding solutions that the aliens had never considered. Jun-woo, now working as a maintenance technician on several testing sites, was watching these developments with great interest. He had managed to access the alien databases and was learning how their testing systems worked. More importantly, he was beginning to understand their weaknesses. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also rigid. The systems were designed based on the assumption that all species would react the same way to extreme conditions. When humans reacted differently, the systems did not know how to adjust. Jun-woo began making small modifications to the testing equipment. He adjusted pressure regulators to give human subjects slightly more air. He modified gravity generators to create brief moments of normal gravity. He changed temperature controls to provide tiny warm spots where humans could rest. The changes were so small that the alien supervisors did not notice them, but they were enough to give humans the extra edge they needed to survive. Dr. Yoon Seo-ra had reached the deepest part of the underwater maze. Here, the pressure was so intense that her suit's systems were beginning to fail. But she had also discovered something interesting. The extreme pressure had created thermal vents in the cave floor. The vents produced warm water that was rich in oxygen. Instead of fighting against the extreme conditions, she began using them to her advantage. She followed the thermal vents, using them as both a source of warmth and a guide through the maze. What the aliens had designed as a death trap became a highway to survival. Lim Jae-hyun had reached the halfway point of the artificial mountain. The gravity here was so strong that each step required enormous effort. But he had also discovered that the increased gravity created interesting effects on the mountain's structure. Ice formations that would normally be unstable became solid climbing surfaces. He began using the alien mountain's own physics against it. He found routes that were only possible because of the extreme gravity. He discovered that the thin air at high altitude actually made certain Climbing techniques more effective, both humans were not just surviving the impossible tests. They were turning the tests into advantages. In testing facilities around the world, other humans were showing similar adaptability. A test subject in a heat chamber had figured out how to use the extreme temperature to power a cooling system, made from parts of her testing equipment. Another subject in a radiation chamber had discovered that certain body positions could reduce radiation exposure by 70%. The aliens had designed each test to be faced alone, but humans kept finding ways to help each other even when they were separated. Test subjects left messages for the next person using subtle marks that the aliens did not recognize. They shared discoveries through coded signals that looked like normal human behavior. Junwoo had been monitoring the alien communications, and he could see that the alien commanders were becoming worried. The physical tests were supposed to break human bodies and spirits. Instead, humans were becoming stronger and more resourceful, but he also learned something that made him very concerned. The aliens had backup plans. If the physical tests failed to break humans, there were worse trials waiting. Tests that had destroyed entire civilizations. Dr. Yoon, SCRA, emerged from the underwater cave system after 4 hours and 37 minutes. She had not only survived the impossible maze, she had mapped it completely and found 3 different exit routes. The alien supervisor stood in silent shock as she removed her helmet and smiled. "That was challenging," she said. "But the thermal vents made it almost enjoyable once I figured out the pattern." Lim Jae-hyun reached the summit of the artificial mountain in record time. He had not only adapted to the extreme conditions, he had used them to climb faster than would have been possible under normal gravity. When he retrieved the marker beacon, he also left behind a small cairn of stones arranged in a pattern that would help the next climber. Around the world, humans were completing impossible tests and helping each other do the same. What the aliens had designed as individual trials of endurance had become collaborative exercises in problem-solving and survival. Commander Zorak reviewed the test results with growing alarm. The physical conditioning phase has failed completely. Not only are the humans surviving, they are excelling. Some of them are performing better under extreme conditions than under normal conditions. High Commander Velthara studied the data in silence. In thousands of years of testing, no species had ever turned the trials into advantages. Most species barely survived the mental conditioning. None had ever made it through the physical tests without significant casualties. "How many humans have we lost so far?" Velthara asked. "None," Zorak replied. "0 casualties. In fact, several test subjects have requested to attempt the tests again because they found them interesting challenges. This was unprecedented. The physical trials were designed to eliminate at least 60% of test subjects. They were meant to show species that resistance was hopeless and submission was the only option for survival, but humans were treating the trials like puzzles to be solved. They were sharing solutions, adapting to extreme conditions, and even enjoying the challenges. Junwoo, listening to this conversation through his maintenance access to the alien communication systems, allowed himself a small smile. Humans were proving to be much more resilient than the aliens had expected. But he knew this was only the beginning. The aliens still had their ultimate weapons, trials designed not just to test physical and mental limits, but to break the human spirit completely. Tests that had reduced mighty civilizations to broken servants. Junwoo began preparing for the next phase. He had learned enough about alien. The space station called the Crucible was the size of a small city. Floating in the darkness between Earth and Mars, engineer Song Mi-young stared out through the thick window at the stars and wondered if she would ever see Earth again. The transport ship that had brought her here was already gone, leaving 30 human test subjects alone with their alien captors. "Welcome to the final phase of evaluation," High Commander Velthara announced as the humans were gathered in a large, circular chamber. "The tests you have completed so far were merely preparation. Here, we will discover what your species is truly made of." Professor Nam Ki-wong, a philosopher who had spent his life studying human nature, looked around at his fellow test subjects. They were the best that humanity had to offer. Scientists, artists, athletes, leaders. But he could see the worry in their eyes. Something about this place felt different from the earlier test sites. More dangerous. More final. Dr. Leonji, a medical doctor who had volunteered to help understand alien biology, checked the readings on her portable scanner. The air here was breathable, but it contained trace chemicals that seemed designed to affect human brain chemistry. The aliens were already starting to manipulate their minds before the tests even began. The trials you will face here are unique, continued Velthara. They are not tests of strength or intelligence. They are tests of character, tests of will, tests of the deepest part of what makes you human. The aliens led the humans to individual chambers that were completely white and empty except for a single chair in the center. Each chamber had walls made of a material that seemed to show images like a television screen, but the images moved and changed as if they were alive. Song Mi-young was the first to be tested. As soon as she sat in the chair, the walls around her began to show scenes from Earth, but these were not normal scenes. They showed her home city of Seoul being destroyed by alien weapons. Buildings falling, people running and screaming. Everyone she had ever loved dying in the attack. This is the future that awaits your planet if you do not cooperate, the alien voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. Your species will be eliminated. Your world will be given to others who are more deserving. The only way to prevent this is complete submission to the Galactic Confederation. Mi-young knew this was not real. The aliens had not attacked Earth, but the images were so detailed and realistic that her heart began beating faster. She could smell the smoke from the burning buildings. She could hear the screams of the dying the alien technology was making. Her brain believed something that had not happened. In the next chamber, Professor Nam Ki-wong was facing a different kind of nightmare. The walls showed him scenes of human history, but everything was wrong. Every great achievement of humanity was revealed to be a lie or a mistake. Every hero was shown to be a villain. Every moment of progress was actually a step toward destruction. Your species is flawed beyond repair, the alien voice told him. You pretend to be noble, but you are violent and selfish. You pretend to be wise, but you destroy everything you touch. The galaxy will be better without you. Dr. Leonji found herself watching her own memories, but they had been changed. Every patient she had ever saved was shown dying anyway. Every life she had tried to help was revealed to be worthless. Her entire career as a doctor was presented as a series of failures that had caused more harm than good. You are not a healer, the alien voice whispered. You are a pretender. Your efforts to help others have only brought pain and death. You should have never tried to save anyone. The aliens had designed these tests based on thousands of years of experience breaking other species. They attacked the deepest beliefs and values that held a civilization together. They showed people that everything they cared about was meaningless, that all their efforts were worthless, that their entire species was a mistake that needed to be corrected. Every other species had eventually accepted these messages. Faced with the apparent futility of existence, they had given up hope and agreed to serve the Galactic Confederation. It was easier than continuing to fight for a cause that seemed hopeless, but the aliens had not understood humans very well. Song. Mi-young watched the images of Seoul being destroyed and felt something that the aliens did not expect. Instead of despair, she felt anger. Instead of submission, she felt determination. You are showing me this to make me afraid, she said out loud to the empty chamber. But fear is not what I feel. I feel angry that you think this will work on me. I feel determined to make sure this never happens. She stood up from the chair and walked to the wall, showing the destruction. This is not real. But even if it were real, showing it to me would not make me give up. It would make me fight harder. Professor Nam Ki-wong listened to the alien voice, telling him that humanity was worthless, and began to laugh. You do not understand humans at all, he said. Yes, we are flawed. Yes, we make mistakes. But that is what makes us human. We are not perfect, but we keep trying to be better. That is not a weakness. That is our greatest strength. He began walking around the chamber, studying the false images of human history. You are showing me lies and calling them truth. But I have spent my life studying truth, and I know the difference. Humans are capable of great evil, but we are also capable of great good. You are only showing me one side because you are afraid of the other side. Dr. Leonji watched her altered memories and shook her head. I have made mistakes as a doctor. Every doctor has, but I have also saved lives. I have helped people. I have reduced suffering in the world. You can show me false memories, but you cannot change what I know to be true about myself. She sat back down in the chair and closed her eyes. I do not need to watch your lies. I know who I am and what I have done. Your technology cannot change. That. In chamber after chamber, the humans were responding in ways that the aliens had never seen before. Instead of being broken by the psychological attacks, they were becoming stronger. Instead of accepting the alien version of reality, they were rejecting it completely. Meanwhile, Junwu had managed to reach the crucible by hiding in a supply transport. The aliens had needed maintenance workers for the station, and Junwu had volunteered for the job. Now he was working in the deepest levels of the station, cleaning and repairing systems that the aliens considered too unimportant to monitor closely. But Junwu was not just cleaning, he was learning. The crucible was the aliens' most advanced testing facility, and its computer systems contained information about every species they had ever tested. Junwu had found records of hundreds of civilizations that had been brought to this station. What he learned made his blood run cold. The aliens called this phase final conditioning, but it was really systematic psychological torture. Species that resisted too long were simply eliminated. Their worlds were stripped of resources and given to other alien races, but he also found something that gave him hope. The alien records showed that no species had ever resisted final conditioning for more than 72 hours. Most broke within 24 hours. But the humans had been in the chambers for 48 hours, and their resistance was actually getting stronger. The alien systems were not designed to handle subjects who fought back for so long. The psychological manipulation technology was starting to overheat from trying to break minds that refused to be broken. Junwu began his most dangerous work yet. He started making changes to the station's core systems. Not dramatic changes that would be noticed immediately, but small adjustments that would compound over time. He modified the power distribution systems that fed the psychological manipulation chambers. He adjusted the data processing systems that created the false images and sounds. He even found ways to introduce tiny glitches into the alien communication networks. Sung Mi-young had been in her chamber for 60 hours. The aliens had tried every psychological attack they could think of. They had shown her the destruction of Earth dozens of times. They had presented her with false evidence that her engineering work was worthless. They had tried to convince her that her family and friends hated her, but instead of breaking her down, each attack had taught her something new about how the alien technology worked. She began to realize that the images on the walls were generated by computers, not by real observation of Earth. The alien threats were empty. They could not actually destroy Earth because they were too far away to do it quickly. I know what you are doing, she announced to her chamber. You are trying to make me believe that resistance is hopeless, but I am an engineer. I solve problems for a living, and you have just become my latest problem to solve. Professor Nam Ki-wong had reached a similar conclusion. You keep showing me the worst parts of humanity because you want me to believe that is all we are. But I know better. I have seen humans sacrifice themselves to save strangers. I have seen humans dedicate their lives to helping others. I have seen humans choose love over hate, hope over fear, courage over safety. Dr. Leonji had begun to analyze the alien technology itself. Your psychological manipulation is sophisticated, but it has limits. You can create false images and sounds, but you cannot actually read my thoughts or change my memories. Everything you are showing me is based on guesswork about what might frighten me. Around the crucible, all 30 Jinwoo crawled through the maintenance shaft that ran along the outer edge of the crucible's central core. The space was barely wide enough for a human body, and the metal was cold against his skin. But it was also the one place on the station where the aliens never went. For 3 days he had been mapping every corridor, every system, every hidden pathway in the massive station. His small notebook was now filled with detailed drawings and observations. What he had discovered in those pages would change everything. The Crucible was not just a testing facility. It was a processing plant for enslaved civilizations. Jinwoo reached a junction where several maintenance shafts met and pulled out his improvised tools. Using parts he had taken from cleaning equipment and spare electronics, he had built a device that could tap into the alien computer networks without being detected. It was crude compared to alien technology, but it worked. The information he found in the alien databases was horrifying. Over the past 3,000 years, the Galactic Confederation had tested over 400 species. Not one had been allowed to join as an equal member. Species that passed the tests became slave labor. Species that failed the tests were eliminated completely, but the records also showed something else. Humanity's tests were different from all the others. The aliens had used more extreme methods, more advanced technology, and more psychological pressure than they had ever used before. They were afraid of humans in a way they had never been afraid of any other species. Jinwoo scrolled through files that contained the alien analysis of human behavior. The aliens had been studying humanity for decades, and what they had learned worried them. Humans showed levels of creativity, adaptability, and resistance that were far beyond anything they had encountered. One report, written by High Commander Velfara herself, was particularly revealing. Human psychological structure is fundamentally different from all previously tested species. They show unprecedented ability to maintain hope in hopeless situations. They demonstrate cooperation even when isolated. Most concerning, they appear to become stronger when faced with adversity, rather than weaker. Recommend maximum conditioning protocols to prevent potential uprising. Jinwoo photographed every document he could find with a small camera he had built from spare parts. Then he began to explore the physical structure of the station itself. What he discovered was even worse than the computer files. The lower levels of the crucible contained vast chambers filled with strange devices that looked like mechanical cocoons. Inside each cocoon was a being from another world, connected to machines by countless wires and tubes. These were the successful test subjects from other species. They were still alive, but their minds had been completely broken and rebuilt to serve the Galactic Confederation. They had been turned into living computers, processing information and following orders without any will of their own. Jinwoo counted over 10,000 cocoons in the facility, 10,000 individuals from hundreds of different worlds, all reduced to mindless servants. This was what awaited humanity if the aliens succeeded in breaking their test subjects. But Jinwoo also found something that gave him hope. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also incredibly complex. Complex systems always had weaknesses if you knew where to look. He spent hours studying the power distribution networks, the computer processing centers, and the life support systems. Everything on the Crucible was connected. Everything depended on everything else. That meant that small changes in the right places could have massive effects throughout the entire station. Jinwoo began to plan the most important maintenance work of his life. Meanwhile, in the testing chambers, the human subjects had been undergoing psychological torture for 4 days straight. But instead of breaking down, they had begun to coordinate their resistance in ways that amazed even themselves. Song Myung had figured out that the chamber walls were not just displaying false images. They were also sensors that could detect human emotional responses. By controlling her reactions, she could feed false information back to the alien computers. She began pretending to be more afraid than she actually was, then suddenly switching to confidence. The alien systems, designed to respond to predictable emotional patterns, began to malfunction when faced with deliberately inconsistent data. Professor Nam Ki-wong had made an even more important discovery. The alien voice that spoke to him During the tests was not actually an alien. It was a computer program designed to sound like an alien. And computer programs could be confused if you knew how to talk to them. He began asking the voice complex philosophical questions about the nature of existence and morality. The program was designed to deliver psychological attacks, not to engage in debate. When forced to respond to unexpected questions, it began giving contradictory answers that revealed its artificial nature. Dr. Lianji had realized that the false memories being shown to her contained small but consistent errors. The alien computers had created fake versions of her experiences, but they had gotten important details wrong. She began pointing out these errors in detail, forcing the system to work harder and harder to maintain its illusions. All 30 human test subjects were turning the psychological attacks back on their attackers. They were doing something that no other species had ever done. They were fighting the alien technology with their minds and winning. Jun-Wu, monitoring the alien communications from his hidden position, could see that the station's commanders were becoming desperate. They had never encountered subjects who could resist final conditioning for more than 72 hours. The humans had been resisting for over 96 hours, and their defiance was actually increasing, but he also intercepted communications that terrified him. The aliens were preparing to use their final option, direct neural control. They were going to connect the human subjects directly to the same machines that had enslaved thousands of other beings. Jun-Wu knew he had to act quickly. He began implementing the plan he had developed during his exploration of the station. First, he modified the power distribution systems to create feedback loops in the neural control equipment. If the aliens tried to use direct neural control on the humans, the feedback would damage the alien systems instead of enslaving the human minds. Second, he introduced subtle errors into the station's navigation computers. The Crucible was designed to move to different locations in space to avoid detection, but with navigation errors it would drift closer to Earth, where human rescue ships might eventually find it. Third, and most importantly, he began connecting the human test subjects to each other through the station's own communication networks. The aliens had isolated the humans to break their spirits, but Jun-Wu was about to give them something no other test subjects had ever had: the ability to work together, using his maintenance access to the station's systems. He quietly modified the chambers so that the humans could communicate with each other. He had to be very careful. The changes had to look like random system glitches, not deliberate sabotage. Song Mi-young was the first to notice the change. While she was pretending to study the false images on her chamber walls, she began to see brief flashes of other images. Images that looked like they came from other chambers. Other test subjects, she realized what was happening and began sending her own messages. Using her engineering knowledge, she figured out how to encode information in the emotional responses. That the chamber walls were designed to detect. Soon, all 30 human subjects were in contact with each other. For the first time since arriving at the Crucible, they could coordinate their resistance. Professor Nam Ki-wong used the communication network to share his discoveries about the artificial nature of the alien voices. Dr. Lianji shared her analysis of the errors in the false memory systems. Song Mi-young shared her techniques for confusing the emotional detection sensors. Together, they began to plan something that no test subjects had ever attempted: active resistance against their alien captors. Jun-Wu watched the alien command center through his hidden cameras and saw panic beginning to spread among the station's officers. The human subjects were not just surviving the tests. They were learning from them, adapting to them, and turning them into advantages. But he also saw High Commander Valthara making preparations for the final phase of conditioning. If psychological torture would not break the humans, the aliens were prepared to use direct neural control to destroy their minds completely. Jin-Woo looked at his small notebook, filled with diagrams and observations. He had spent his whole life maintaining systems and keeping them running smoothly. Now he was about to use that knowledge to tear apart the most advanced technological system in the galaxy, but he was not doing it alone. Above him, 30 human test subjects were preparing to fight back against their captors. They did not know about Junwoo, and he did not know exactly what they were planning. But for the first time since arriving at the Crucible, humans were working together again. The aliens had made their greatest mistake. They had assumed that separating humans would make them weaker. Instead, the separation had only made them more determined to find each other again, and when humans worked together, they could accomplish things that no other species in the galaxy had ever imagined possible. The first malfunction happened at 0347 station time. Song Myung was in her testing chamber when the temperature suddenly increased by exactly 3 degrees. It was a small change, but it was exactly the temperature that humans found most comfortable for thinking clearly. 47 minutes later, the air circulation system in Professor Nam Ki-Wong's chamber developed a glitch that increased the oxygen content by 2%. Again, a small change, but one that made human brains work more efficiently. High Commander Velthara reviewed the maintenance reports with mild annoyance. How many system malfunctions have we had in the past week? 17 minor incidents. Sir, replied Commander Zorak, all within acceptable parameters. The maintenance staff reports that these are normal variations for a station of this size and complexity. Velthara dismissed the report without much thought. The Crucible was an old station and minor system glitches were expected. What he did not know was that every single malfunction had been carefully designed by Junwoo to help the human test subjects. Junwoo had spent 5 days learning every detail of the Crucible systems. He knew which changes would be noticed, and which would be ignored. He knew how to make deliberate sabotage look like random equipment failure. Most importantly, he knew how to help the humans without revealing that they had help. The changes were subtle, but effective. Environmental controls that favored human physiology. Communication glitches that allowed the test subjects to coordinate with each other. Security systems that developed blind spots at exactly the right moments. Dr. Lee Yun-ji noticed that the lights in her chamber had started flickering in a pattern that seemed almost like code. When she began responding with her own light patterns using the chamber's control panel, the flickering changed to match her responses. She realized that someone was communicating with her through the station's lighting systems. Someone who understood both human communication methods and alien technology. Someone who was helping them. Meanwhile, Song Mi-young had discovered that the false images on her chamber walls were becoming easier to identify as fake. The resolution was slightly lower than before. The colors were slightly off. It was as if the system generating the images was operating at reduced efficiency. She began testing the limits of the system by deliberately thinking about complex engineering problems. Each time she did, the false images became more distorted and unrealistic. Something was interfering with the alien technology's ability to read her thoughts accurately. Professor Nam Kai-wong found that the artificial voice delivering psychological attacks had developed a slight delay between his questions and its responses. The delays were getting longer each day, and the responses were becoming more generic and less personal. It was becoming obvious that the alien systems were struggling to maintain their psychological attacks on the human subjects. But the aliens themselves seemed unaware of the growing problems. Jinwoo continued his careful sabotage. He had identified the most critical systems on the station and was making tiny adjustments to each one. A power relay adjusted by 2%. A processing circuit modified to run 3 degrees warmer. A communication buffer reduced in size by a few kilobytes individually. These changes were meaningless. Together, they were slowly degrading the performance of every system on the Crucible. But Junwoo's most important work was in the neural control systems that the aliens were preparing to use as their final weapon against the humans. These systems were designed to directly interface with a subject's brain and rewrite their personality to make them obedient slaves. Junwoo studied these systems carefully and found their greatest weakness. They were designed to work on species that had already been broken by psychological conditioning. They expected to find minds that were defeated and hopeless. They were not built to handle minds that were still fighting back. he began introducing small errors into the neural control programming, changes that would cause the system to malfunction if it encountered strong resistance, changes that might turn the alien technology against itself. The humans in the testing chambers were beginning to work together in ways that amazed even themselves. Song Mi-young had used her engineering knowledge to map the station's power systems by studying the fluctuations in her chamber's electrical supply. Professor Nam Ki-wong had analyzed the artificial voices and figured out how to confuse them with logical paradoxes. Dr. Lee Yunji had discovered how to send medical data to the other subjects through the station's monitoring systems. Teacher and Hyo Seon, who had been quiet during most of the testing, suddenly became the coordinator for all human communication. She had spent her career helping children learn to work together, and she applied those same skills to organizing the resistance among the test subjects. "We need to share everything we have learned," she transmitted to the others through the modified communication systems. "Each of us has discovered something important about how these systems work. Together we can find their weaknesses." Former soldier Ru Dongmin had been analyzing the station's security procedures by watching the patterns of alien guard movements outside his chamber. He had identified shift changes, patrol routes, and vulnerable periods when human subjects might be able to move around the station. "The aliens are confident that we cannot escape from these chambers," he reported to the others. "But their confidence makes them careless. They are not watching for coordinated action because they do not believe we are capable of it." What the aliens did not understand was that humans had spent thousands of years learning to work together in small groups, even isolated in separate chambers. They found ways to coordinate and support each other. Junwoo monitored the alien command communications and saw that confusion was spreading among the station's officers. The test subjects were not behaving according to any known pattern. Their resistance was increasing instead of decreasing. Their coordination was improving instead of breaking down. Most disturbing to the aliens, their technology was becoming less effective each day. The psychological manipulation systems that had broken hundreds of other species were having minimal impact on humans. "Sir," Commander Zorak reported to High Commander Velthara, "the conditioning systems are operating at only 60% efficiency. We are experiencing cascading system failures throughout the station." "What is causing these failures?" Velthara demanded. "Unknown, sir. The maintenance staff reports that all systems are within normal operating parameters, but the cumulative effect of minor malfunctions is significantly reducing our operational capability." Velthara studied the reports with growing concern. In all his years of operating the Crucible, he had never seen such widespread system degradation. It was as if the station itself was fighting against the conditioning process. "Initiate neural control protocols immediately," he ordered. "We cannot wait for the psychological conditioning to be completed. The human subjects must be processed directly." But when the aliens tried to activate the neural control systems, they discovered that Junwoo's sabotage had been even more effective than he had hoped. The systems powered up normally, but when they attempted to connect to the human subjects, massive feedback loops began cascading through the station's neural processing networks. The feedback was caused by the humans' continued resistance. The neural control systems expected to find broken, submissive minds. Instead, they encountered 30 human brains that were actively fighting back, coordinated with each other, and determined to resist. The result was catastrophic for the alien technology. Neural processors began overheating. Control circuits started shorting out. The entire neural control network began shutting down to prevent permanent damage to the station's core systems. For the first time in the history of the Crucible, the alien conditioning systems had been defeated by their intended victims. Artist Kim Na-rae, who had been quietly observing the patterns in the false images shown to her, suddenly realized what was happening. "The systems are failing," she transmitted to the other subjects. "Something is helping us. Someone is sabotaging the alien technology." Mathematician Dr. Oh Kyung-ho had been analyzing the statistical patterns in the system failures. "The malfunctions are not random," he reported. They follow a deliberate pattern designed to maximize human advantage while appearing accidental. Someone with detailed knowledge of both human needs and alien technology is working on our behalf. The humans began to realize that they were not alone in their resistance. Someone else on the station was fighting the aliens. Someone who understood both human nature and alien technology well enough to help them without being detected. Jun-Wu, monitoring the alien communications from his hidden position, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The neural control systems were offline. The psychological conditioning systems were operating at minimal efficiency. The humans were coordinating their resistance and growing stronger each day, but he also knew that the aliens had one final option. If they could not break the humans through conditioning, they might decide to eliminate them completely. Jun-Wu had seen references in the alien databases to subject termination protocols. Used when conditioning failed, he began preparing for the next phase of his sabotage. The aliens had brought humanity to their most advanced facility to High Commander Velthara stood in the central neural chamber of the Crucible, surrounded by massive machines that hummed with deadly power. These were the most advanced mind control devices in the galaxy, capable of rewriting the fundamental personality of any living being. They had never failed. "Bring all human subjects to the Neural Processing Center," he ordered. "We will end this resistance once and for all." The 30 human test subjects were escorted from their individual chambers to a circular room at the heart of the Crucible. In the center of the room stood a complex device covered in thousands of neural interface cables. Around the edges of the room, alien technicians monitored banks of computers that would control the mind-rewriting process. Song Mi-young looked at the neural control device and immediately understood what it was designed to do. As an engineer, she could see the power distribution patterns, the data processing capabilities, the neural interface connections. This machine was built to destroy minds and rebuild them from scratch. "This is their final weapon," she whispered to Professor Nam Ki-wong through the subtle communication network they had developed. "They are going to try to rewrite our personalities to make us obedient." Professor Nam Ki-wong studied the alien technicians and noticed something important. They were nervous. Throughout all the previous tests, the aliens had been confident and calm. Now they were checking and rechecking their equipment, exchanging worried glances, speaking in hushed tones. "They are afraid," he transmitted to the others. "This is not routine for them. Something about us has made them desperate enough to use a weapon they are not comfortable using." Dr. Liuanji analyzed the neural interface cables and realized that the system was designed to connect all the subjects together during the rewriting process. "They're going to link our minds," she warned the others. "But that means we will be connected to each other during the process. We might be able to resist together." What none of the humans knew was that Jun-Wu had spent weeks modifying the neural control systems. The changes he had made were subtle but critical. When the system tried to rewrite human minds, it would encounter unexpected resistance that would cause feedback loops throughout the entire network, but Jun-Wu had also made one other crucial modification. Instead of simply causing the system to fail, he had programmed it to reverse the data flow. When the aliens tried to rewrite human minds, the system would instead transmit human thoughts and emotions back into the alien control networks. The aliens began connecting the neural interface cables to the human subjects. Each cable attached to the base of the skull with a device that looked like a metallic crown. The humans felt a strange tingling sensation as the alien technology made contact with their nervous systems. "Neural interface established," reported the lead technician. "All subjects connected. Ready to begin personality restructuring." "Initiate the process," ordered Velthara. The massive machines began to hum with increasing power. Computer screens around the room lit up with complex patterns representing human brain activity. The aliens prepared to witness the destruction of the last truly resistant minds they had ever encountered. But something went wrong immediately. Instead of the expected pattern of minds being broken down and rebuilt, The computer showed something unprecedented. The 30 human minds, connected together by the neural interface, were not becoming weaker. They were becoming stronger. Song Mi-young felt her consciousness expand as she became aware of the thoughts and feelings of all the other human subjects. But instead of confusion or fear, she felt a sense of unity and purpose that was more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. Professor Nam Ki-wong found that his philosophical knowledge was enhanced by the practical skills of the engineers. The medical knowledge of the doctors, the tactical thinking of the soldiers, and the creativity of the artists. Together, the human minds formed something greater than the sum of their parts. Dr. Li Yunji felt the combined will of 30 humans focused on a single goal: resistance. Not just resistance to the alien conditioning, but active opposition to everything the Galactic Confederation represented. Artist Kim Nare suddenly understood the patterns she had been seeing in the alien systems. With her mind connected to mathematician Dr. Oh Kyung-ho, she could see the mathematical structures underlying alien technology. Together, they began to analyze and understand the neural control system itself. The alien technicians watched their computer screens with growing alarm. "Sir, the neural restructuring is not proceeding as expected. The subjects are showing unprecedented coordination and resistance." "Increase power," ordered Velthara, but increasing power only made the situation worse. The more energy the system put into trying to control human minds, the stronger the humans became. And thanks to Jinwoo's modifications, all that energy was beginning to flow in the opposite direction, the neural control system, designed to impose alien thoughts on human minds, suddenly began transmitting human thoughts to the alien control networks. For the first time in their species' history, the aliens found themselves experiencing human emotions: hope, the feeling that things could be better than they were, that progress was always possible, that no situation was truly hopeless. Love, the willingness to sacrifice for others, to put the needs of family and community above personal safety, to care about strangers simply because they existed. Courage, the determination to do what was right even when it was dangerous, to stand up to bullies and oppressors, to fight for justice even when victory seemed impossible. Defiance, the absolute refusal to accept defeat, to surrender to those who claimed to be superior, to bow down to power that was used to hurt others. The alien technicians began collapsing at their control stations. Their minds, evolved over thousands of years to accept hierarchy and submission, could not handle the overwhelming force of human emotional determination. Commander Zarak fell to his knees as waves of human hope crashed over his consciousness. His species had been taught that hope was dangerous, that acceptance of one's place in the universe was the only path to peace. But now he was experiencing the incredible power of believing that things could be better. High Commander Velthara tried to shut down the neural control system, but it was too late. The feedback loops that Jinwoo had programmed into the network were cascading throughout the Crucible's entire computer system. Every alien on the station was being exposed to the full force of human consciousness. The humans, their minds linked together by the alien technology, suddenly understood something that no other species had ever realized. The Galactic Confederation was not held together by superior technology or advanced wisdom. It was held together by fear and hopelessness. The aliens had convinced thousands of species that resistance was useless, and that submission was the only option, that the natural order of the universe required some beings to rule and others to serve. But humans had never accepted that natural order. Teacher and Hyoseon, her mind connected to all the others, began to project a simple but revolutionary idea through the neural network. Every being has the right to be free. Every species deserves to choose its own path. No one has the right to break another's spirit or steal their will. The idea spread through the alien computer networks like a virus, reaching every system on the Crucible. The thousands of enslaved beings in the lower levels of the station, their minds connected to the same networks, suddenly felt something they had not experienced in centuries. Hope. Former soldier Ru Dongmin felt the awakening consciousness of beings from hundreds of different worlds. Species that had been broken and enslaved, their minds trapped in mechanical cocoons, were beginning to remember who they had been before the aliens destroyed their will. The neural control system, designed to enslave minds, had instead become a liberation network. Human consciousness was spreading through alien technology, awakening every enslaved being it touched. Mathematician Dr. Oh Kyung-ho, his mind enhanced by connection to all the other humans, began to understand the true structure of the Galactic Confederation. It was not a civilization at all. It was a parasite that fed on the creativity and will of other species, but parasites were vulnerable when their hosts stopped cooperating. Artist Kim Nar felt the moment when the enslaved beings throughout the crucible began to resist their programming. Thousands of minds that had been trapped for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The alien control networks began shutting down as the enslaved beings refused to process data, follow orders, or maintain the systems that kept them trapped. For the first time in galactic history, the slaves were freeing themselves. High Commander Velthara, overwhelmed by human emotions that his mind could not process, finally understood the magnitude of his species' mistake. Humans were not just another species to be tested and broken. They were something entirely new in the galaxy, a species that made others stronger instead of weaker. As the neural control system finally shut down completely, the humans found themselves still connected to each other and to thousands of other awakened minds throughout the station. They had not just survived the aliens' ultimate weapon. They had turned it into a tool of liberation. Jun Woo, monitoring the chaos from his hidden position in the maintenance shafts, allowed himself a quiet smile. 1 year later, Ambassador Kang Dae-ho stood in the rebuilt Assembly Hall of the United Nations. But this time he was not alone. Representatives from over 200 worlds sat in the expanded chamber, all of them free beings who had chosen to come to Earth to help build something the galaxy had never seen before. A true confederation of equals. The events that the history books would call the Quiet Revolution had begun with one maintenance worker and 30 test subjects aboard the Crucible. But it had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Park So-min, now the director of interspecies biology, reviewed the reports from the liberated worlds. The psychological chains were so much stronger than the physical ones, she explained to the assembled delegates. Once beings remembered what freedom felt like, they could not be enslaved again. The former Galactic Confederation had collapsed within 6 months. Not through war or violence, but through simple refusal. Species after species had simply stopped obeying orders, stopped processing data for their masters, stopped accepting that submission was their natural state. Some alien worlds had tried to maintain control through force, but they discovered that enslaved minds were necessary to operate their advanced technology. Without willing servants, their great machines fell silent and their mighty ships stopped flying. Jun-Woo, who had reluctantly accepted the title of Chief Systems Coordinator for the new Galactic Assembly, preferred to spend his time in the maintenance levels of the Earth headquarters. He kept the building running smoothly while delegations from across the galaxy worked to establish principles of cooperation and mutual respect. I still do not understand how you did it, High Commander Velthara said to him during one of their regular conversations. The former alien leader now worked as a counselor, helping other former oppressors understand and overcome their conditioning. Junwoo looked up from the air filtration system he was repairing. I just paid attention to how things really work, he said simply. Complex systems are fragile. Change a few small things in the right places and everything changes. Velthara nodded, though he still struggled to understand human thinking. But you were just one person against an entire galactic empire. How did you know you could succeed? I did not know, Jinwoo replied. But I knew that someone had to try. And I knew that systems built on fear and oppression always have weaknesses. You just have to be patient enough to find them. The humans who had been test subjects aboard the Crucible had become leaders in the new galactic community. Song Mi-young now headed the Interstellar Engineering Council, helping newly freed worlds rebuild their technology without enslaving other beings. Professor Nam Ki-wong had established the Galactic Ethics Institute, working to ensure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. Dr. Leonji ran medical exchange programs that shared healing knowledge between worlds. Teacher and Hyoseon had created educational networks that helped species learn from each other without domination or control, but the most important change was not in technology or politics. It was in the way beings thought about each other. Artist Kim Nare had established cultural exchange programs that revealed something amazing. Every species had something unique and valuable to contribute. The galaxy was not a hierarchy with advanced species at the top and primitive species at the bottom. It was a community where different kinds of intelligence and creativity could work together. Mathematician Dr. Oh Kyung-ho had discovered that the mathematical principles underlying consciousness were the same across all species. Minds were not meant to be broken and rebuilt. They were meant to grow and learn and connect with other minds. Former soldier Ru Dong-min had helped establish the Galactic Protection Service not as a military force, but as a rapid response network for worlds that needed help defending their freedom from any remaining oppressor groups. The changes had not been easy. Many species struggled to overcome thousands of years of conditioning that taught them to accept hierarchy and submission. Some former slave species found freedom frightening after so long without choices. Some former master species could not accept that they were not naturally superior to others, but humans had a gift for helping others adapt to change. They seemed to understand that freedom was not something you achieved once and then kept forever. It was something you had to choose every day, and something you had to help others choose as well. Junwoo's quiet revolution had revealed something that the galaxy had forgotten. Cooperation was more powerful than domination, creativity was more valuable than control, and hope was stronger than fear. The new Galactic Assembly operated on principles that would have seemed impossible to the old Confederation. Every species had an equal voice, regardless of their technology level or military power. Decisions were made through consensus, not force. Knowledge was shared freely rather than hoarded as a source of power. Most importantly, there were no more tests to determine if a species was worthy of freedom. The Assembly's founding charter, written primarily by the humans who had survived the Crucible, stated simply, all conscious beings have